Right, recording is in progress. So welcome everyone. I do appreciate everyone taking time out of their morning to attend this meeting. I believe this is definitely one of the lifeline of our organizations is having the voice and advice of all the coaches in each particular sport. In this particular case, is girls lacrosse. So I do appreciate you guys taking your time for this vital opportunity to provide direct feedback and possible rule changes. So for those of you who are new to this committee, the purpose of this committee is to introduce suggestions and rule changes to the FHSAA regarding the sport of girls lacrosse. The way the process generally works is any action item takes about a 2-year, takes a 2-year cycle for a rule to change. The first year, the item is reviewed and or approved by the sport committee, which will be this committee. Then after that, it goes to the athletic director's advisory committee, who either endorses or does not endorse the item. And in that process, they provide feedback on why they endorsed it or why they didn't endorse it. At that point, it sits for a year and comes back to the sport committee for another year review, which we have a few items on the agenda that are currently in that state, where this committee reviews it once again and has to either approve or deny, make adjustments based on feedback, so on and so forth. Then it goes back again to the athletic director advisory committee for a second reading, where they provide their final feedback and endorse or not endorse. Then it goes to the FHSAA board of directors for final review and or approval or denial of the item. So that's generally the process every single item goes through when making a rules change. So, but this is the beginning stage of that. With that said, did everyone get my email with the agenda? Okay.
Yeah.
So we will take this opportunity. The first item actually says selection of vice chair. Last year, we did not have a quorum, so we did not select the vice chair. So there's no chairperson for this meeting. There are 2 vacancies for this committee right now. So because of that, with 4 members now, we do have a quorum right now with the 4 members, since there are less members of the committee. With that said, we will need to select a chairperson for this committee who will actually run the meeting. Moving forward, I can be here for assistance and I'll be taking minutes of the meeting, but the meeting needs to be ran by one of the members of the committee. And before we get that far, any item that's a voting item, we use the Robert Rules of Order. So any item is presented by the presenter, whoever introduced the item. After that, we need a motion a motion and a second before we can begin discussion. So whoever we select as a chairperson, I will definitely do my best to try and remind you of that process as we go through. So do not get nervous of trying to remember anything. That's kind of what my job is here, is to make sure we keep that in task and in order. But with that said, at this point, I will open the floor for nominations for selection of a chairperson for this meeting.
I'll nominate myself if no one else wants to do it. I've been a chair of Board of Education a few years, so I'm familiar with that if anybody else is interested.
I second your nomination, Jose.
Thank you,
All right.
Coach.
So I hear a motion for Coach Herrera and a second. And I do apologize, I am taking minutes. So if I'm looking away and typing, that's because I'm taking minutes. So now I need, so we have a motion and a second. So now we need to take a vote on having Coach Herrera as the chairperson for this meeting. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The same? Hearing none. Coach Herrera, you are the chairperson for the meeting. At this point forward, I will stop talking and I'll let you take over with the agenda.
Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. There's Item 3, it says vice chairperson. Alex, are we selecting a vice chairperson as well, or are we just going
Well,
to?
we're just gonna do the chairperson this time, just because we don't have a full committee at the moment and we are missing one member. So it'll just be easier just to do the chair from time to time at this point.
Okay. Item number 4 on the agenda is the adoption of the 2022 meeting minutes. If anybody sees any irregularities in the meetings, or if I can get a motion to pass these the meeting minutes from the 2022.
Motion to pass.
I have a motion from Coach Jason to pass the meeting minutes from 2022. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second from Coach Lynn Garrison. Now we vote on to pass the meeting minutes for 2022. Is there any, say aye with, or just raise your hand. I don't know. We used to do it in our thing just to make sure like it's on video. Raise your hand if you want to pass the minutes. Any opposed? No, perfect. Item number 5 on the agenda is the state championship tournament. Alex, where are we going on here? Let me see here.
So, I mean, I can jump on here. I do want to extend a big thanks for the folks at Collier County Schools, which includes Coach Lynn, who did a phenomenal job assisting us at the state championship, not just this year, but the previous year as well. If you guys have never been down there, the venue is phenomenal. The only downside I see is it's hot and the turf field is very hot. With the exception of that, the facility is top notch. We were very satisfied with how everything was ran, with the assistance of Paradise Coast Sports Complex and their staffing, as well as Mark Rosenbaum, Collier County AD, and the assistance provided by his staff and the ADs in Collier County, as well as some of the coaches who were there to assist us with both the boys and girls lacrosse tournament. I thought it went very well. It was the second year there. There was definitely issues the first year, and those issues were adjusted the second year. There were some minor issues this year, but these are things we're working through to make sure that the event is perfect. No event's ever perfect, but we can strive for perfection almost every time, and I think we're getting there with this event. So I'm very proud of all the hard work the folks did down there. Lynn, do you want to extend anything? Expand on that?
Like I'm there all the time. I love it. I was there the entire time, and
we
anyway,
genuinely appreciate all the help you guys provided. We really do. It was a lot. It was a lot of help, a lot of work, and it could not be done without you guys. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. I heard great things about it too. So cool. Old business, the headgear mandate. Alex, do we just want to, what are we discussing here? Are we bringing?
So this item has been tabled by this committee from last meeting. So we can just pick up that conversation from there. At this point, I feel like we need to take some sort of action, whether it's either to approve the item or deny the item moving forward. Last go around, it was actually I don't believe ADAC voted on this item because they tabled it for review purposes.
What review? What did they have to review? Because
well,
I remember last year in the meeting that we had here, we were supposed to get some information, and then I believe another coach said something that they were waiting on the information from last year. So now we're on 2 years and we've been tabling this. My opinion on this is we opened, and with the coaches, we opened Pandora's box by putting on helmets on girls. If we take off helmets on girls, it's not, we're not gonna win this battle. Like, we already put helmets on them. I don't see a way that we can remove helmets. Like, in the world that we have now with, yesterday, even what happened with the hockey player, like national TV, parents are seeing this, people, with Tua, especially in Florida, I understand. I believe that the helmets make the sport more dangerous, to be honest, and more violent. 100%. I agree with everyone, but I just don't see how we can convince the public on not wearing helmets when we already established wearing helmets. And we've been sitting on this for 2 years now. If you guys understand what I'm saying.
Before we go too far in discussion, I do believe we need to have a motion and a second on whatever we want direction you feel, and now we can change it once discussion progresses. That can be changed, but we do need a motion and a second either to approve, deny the item, or whatever action you want to take.
So we can have two motions. I'm presuming. One motion is to continue talking about and to try and get helmets, the helmet rule removed or optional for girls, or option two would be just to drop this from the agenda and just keep helmets going on.
So the recommendation is to rescind the mandate. So that would be either we motion to approve the recommendation of taking away the helmets, or to deny the recommendation of
Okay.
taking away the helmets. So that's kind of your options, or table it further if that's the pleasure of the committee.
If we table it further, might as well just
Right.
end it.
But I just want to make sure all the options are there. That's still an
I
option.
just don't understand why it with the information that we've asked, what has been asked for hasn't been given, or why it keeps on tabling
Well,
every year.
and I can get into that once we get a motion in a second.
Okay. I motion, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I just don't see liability purposes. We're already, the helmet thing already came here. I'm just looking at a liability policy thing, you know. I motion to rescind the helmet. I'm sorry, I motion to
Deny,
deny
it's like two negatives.
to rescind the helmet
Yes.
policy. Motion to deny to rescind the helmet policy. There you go.
I gotcha.
I hate it. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, but I just don't see any way we can get out of this now.
And once again,
it already happened.
if you disagree with that motion, we just need something on the table so we can have discussion and we can go back and readjust that motion after
Yeah, I
discussion.
disagree with it.
So is that a second, Jason?
I disagree with the motion.
Okay,
So now the motion is now we'll do another motion to deny, no, to
to approve,
approve rescinding the helmet policy.
I second it.
Okay.
gotcha. All right. All right,
Okay,
so
everybody, to move forward, we need a vote.
no.
Oh, no vote, no vote.
Not yet.
Okay,
So
go
now we can open up for discussion. Now we can talk about it freely. So essentially, the reason it's been tabled twice, tabled by ADAC, tabled by this committee, was for the hope of further research. Last information we received, you know, we I think it was 2021, the research from Dr. Herman, University of Florida, came out and showed that the use of the headgear has a reduction in mitigating risk for concussion. They showed up, and I'm just trying to go off of memory, about 59% of increased risk for girl athletes not wearing the headgear to sustain a concussion compared to the ones who were. That's what it showed. Now, at the time, it was still sitting there for peer review and the peer review process. At this point, I do not believe that peer review has concluded. And that's kind of where we were last time around. That's kind of where we are now. Hence why we haven't had anything further other than that information that was provided. Yeah.
Point of information, I barely remember, but this was said at the meeting. Who funded the study? Who was part of funding this study? I want to put it on record, like, again, like we have to put this on record again.
It was USA Lacrosse, as well as was it NOXI? National, I gotta look it up. Yeah, it was, I believe it was those two organizations that funded the
So Cascade did
research.
not have any part of
No.
this, zero part of this funding for this study.
No. It was not the,
We
it
actually-
was not the Hair companies, it was USA Lacrosse specifically. And to be honest, USA Lacrosse was the one who funded the certification or the standardization of the headgear. So the ASTM process to release a headgear, it came from USA Lacrosse.
So FHSAA is relying on USA Lacrosse certification for this study, correct?
100%. And this initial process back in 2015, there's definitely a lot of misconception of how that occurred. The mandate for the headgear was taken directly from the verbiage used by USA Lacrosse and from the current research they were doing at the time. When we had discussions with USA Lacrosse, they came to our office and described, the current research that we're doing with ASTM and the standardization of headgear. At the time, the board did not want to wait for the STM process. So they passed the item with the understanding that the ATM process was in progress and was due to come within 1 or 2 years. And then that verbiage was going to be used to continue that mandate. So that's why in 2015 through and 16, we had the softer headgear because the current rules dictated that. And then once USA Lacrosse finalized the standardization with the ASTM process, then we switched to that headgear. And it was through those same conversations with USA Lacrosse. So that this whole time, even though it seemed like FHSAA and USA Lacrosse were not looking eye to eye, we really were. It's just our board did not want to wait for the process to start to when the headgear was the beginning of the use of the headgear. They wanted to do it immediately in the progress of waiting for that to end. If that makes sense.
Yeah, Coach Darren, did you say something?
I was, so Dr. Herman is based here in Gainesville and has kids actually at Oak Hall. So we were one of the participant schools. My understanding is when this was all happening, we were part of it and we had these specialized mouthpieces and, he'd have research assistants taking down the information. We didn't complete it because of COVID. And my last I heard, he was picking it back up and there was some new part of it, but I don't think from my standpoint, the information was complete. That's all I had to add.
And what I like to add from all indication is that the research was completed last year and not last year. We're in 2023 now. Sorry, in 2021. So it was after COVID. It was paused during COVID. And it was picked back up after that. And they concluded their research in 2021. And at that point, once it was all released, it was up for peer review. And that's the part that we're still kind of in limbo.
When you say in limbo, what can you when
basically is we haven't heard
nothing,
anything.
you
We have nothing. We haven't heard
nothing.
anything.
Okay, we have nothing.
That's kind of where we're at. That being said, the research hasn't been adjusted or removed or anything like that. So it's still as it's been released. But we just haven't had any sort of further information regarding any type of peer review that they felt there might need to be adjustments or further research, so on and so forth. So they haven't changed anything.
Are we going to put a timeline on this as a board for girls lacrosse? I think we need to set a timeline of, hey, you guys have 2 more years for this to happen. But I'll be honest with you, I mean, I don't know. I agree with you guys. I think we should not have the helmets, but I just don't know where this is going to go. And if we put a timeline in 2 years, is every high school going to be wearing helmets throughout the whole United States?
Here's the problem with that. We have no authority with that process whatsoever. So we could set all the timelines we want. It won't change anything.
Well, I mean, it does change the fact that we are kicking the can down the road and nothing's being done.
No, it really wouldn't change anything because
that's what I'm saying. I mean, then we just stop talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that too, but it's just
why
it's
talk
one of those
about
things
something
that-
if we can't do anything about?
it's one of those things that, you know, we're waiting for it too. We want to know what the right move is. You know, our board did pass this a while back. That doesn't mean we had all the answers when it was passed. So internally, we want to know all the answers as much as anybody else. And however, us, you know, as a Girls Lacrosse Advisory Committee in the state of Florida, putting a timeline will not change anything regarding that research process. It could be 2 more years, it could be 10 more years. We don't know. We have no authority in it. We can just go with what was written by the USA Lacrosse rules book and by the National Federation. And
So,
that's kind of where we're at.
so once again, I asked, the FHSAA is all about the certification with USA Lacrosse and these helmets.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion to table this for next meeting? Or Coach Lynn, I see your brain going, I want you to speak up.
So I hate the headgear. I hate them. And so there was precedence for taking headgear off of helmets off of girls. Back in the 80s, Massachusetts did have put the girls and boys helmets, and they took them off because the sport got too violent. So there is precedence for that. I'm dating myself because I know that, but I hate them. I think girls get braver with it on. It's a false sense of security, and I hate it. And I'm not a fan of them. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm an old school lacrosse person, and I didn't play with any kind of, like, just mouth guard. That's all we played with. You know, but
Well,
I
I
understand.
want to, and not to interrupt you, Lynn, I apologize. I do want to make sure I say this, you know, the USA Lacrosse, when they were doing this, they were thinking of that time. And when
Right.
the headgear was put on, the reason they were very hesitant, and you know, we passed a rule in 2015. They came out with the ASTM process in 2017. They were doing that process well before we passed that rule in 2015. I want to say it was about 10 years in the making. They've been thinking about some type of headgear for the girls' game for quite some time. And in that process, they were thinking about that time in the 80s when I believe they were wearing, like, quote me if I'm wrong, I thought they were hockey helmets, the old school 80 hockey helmets, and how different that headgear was compared to what they felt the sport needed. That was a hard shell helmet compared
Right,
to
it was.
what it is now, which it looks hard shell, but it's not. It's still somewhat soft and flexible. So that was their thought process when they came into this this whole endeavor, is how can we put a piece of equipment on these athletes' heads that are not hard shell, that doesn't change the game, but has some sort of protection. So that was their premise. So that was part of their thought process when it came to putting headgear. And I'm always very careful to not call them helmets
Right.
and call them headgear, because they are not hard shell. They're not like the boys' helmet. They're not like a football helmet. They're not like a hockey helmet either. Those are all hard shell type helmets. These are not. So I always try my best, and I mess up too, but I always try my best to call them headgear, because it is something that's covering their heads, but it's not a hard shell piece of equipment. So it is different. Now, athletes' attitude, is that the same? And I think that's the debatable part. But the piece of equipment is different than what was passed back in the 80s.
And I also know that, like, for some schools, it is a financial burden because they're like $150, you know.
Yeah.
So, like, some schools, it might impact their decision on whether to have a program or not, you know. And I want everybody to play. That's where I'm at. Like, I don't care. I want everybody to play. I love the sport. I want participation.
Yeah. And also, not only do they have to buy them once, but they
Every
have to
4
buy
years.
them every 4 years. So
Right.
it's a big, you can't, use them as much. And it's not football, so they won't get it. Ooh, did
And
I
they
say
can't
that
be
out loud?
reconditioned. Right. And they can't be reconditioned like the football helmets, right?
Yeah. All right, then I motion, or Coach Jason, do you have
Yeah.
anything? Sorry, Coach.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, two things. So one point of interest, Coach Paul McCord with USF recently tweeted that he had heard that Cascade was looking at stopping the manufacturing of the headgear
I heard that as well. Yeah,
because it's just not profitable for them.
Right.
It's
right.
not a profitable venture. I just, go on the record. I'm not a fan of the headgear. My daughter plays in college. She's had 4 concussions, all with headgear on. And it's because of it's because of how physical it was in high school play. We did a friendly with the Brits a couple of years ago when they came over, and the first thing their coach mentioned was, how much more physical the play was than what they were used to. And the reffing has gone that way. It's been a migration of how the game has played has been affected by that headgear, in my opinion. If you've been around the game long enough, you just absolutely see that. I'm not a fan of it. I think step one would be, like Coach Herrera said, make it optional. Because and then let's see how it evolves from there. We don't have to jump into a headgear, no headgear, situation. And I think the concerns around liability and exposure and things of that nature, which I understand that. But, I do know here in Pasco County, it's been pay to play up until this year, which means that all the parents had to come up with $200 per kid just to play. And I had parents and kids coming to me saying, man, I'd love to try the sport. I'd love to play lacrosse. We just can't afford it. And to that event, one of my friends started a foundation, the New Tampa Women's Athletic Foundation, just for the purpose of driving sponsorships to allow access for parents to allow their kids to play, because they can't afford to go out and buy the sticks, the cleats, and everything that's necessary, play the $200, and then the fees on top of that, $75 per kid, just to entertain the sport. So there's been this whole ripple effect with these, with the headgear, and I don't feel like it really takes us in the right direction as a sport.
To grow the sport.
Exactly. And if you know the McCords and what they're doing at USF, she just did a camp for us here in Wesley Chapel. And we invited 6th graders on up, and it was an amazing turnout. She's a wonderful individual, and to hear her philosophies and her thoughts, she's all about growing it. And we kind of got in a little bit of this conversation, and I guess I feel like I don't want to share her opinions, but I feel like that's kind of, we're all kind of on the same page. And so if everybody's of the same mindset, are we all wrong? So that's my thoughts.
Thank you, Coach. Yeah. So one point came, Alex.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you were frozen. My bad.
No, not for us.
One thing that Coach Jason just said that worries me, like, for example, I don't know if the other coaches have had this issue, but Under Armour, the cleats for girls lacrosse, they don't make them anymore. Like, and girls have to start, this year, my girls has to start buying guys cleats. Because the high top ones with, the cool high top ones that are really good for ankle protection, they don't make them anymore. They're hard, or they're very hard to find, or they have limited sizes. That's what my girls told me. That's the back, I checked online and they just don't have them. So Alex, one thing that I would like, for after this meeting and after we do our vote is, because what happens if helmets are no longer made because only one state is purchasing them, and they don't, like Coach Jason, I want to know from the committee, from the higher ups, from the AFHA, say, hey, what happens if we can't get any more helmets? What do we do then?
And that's an answer I won't have, and I don't have, because that's a decision the board will have to make.
Well, that's
But,
what
yeah.
I'm saying. Like, can we get
Yeah.
an answer from the board? Like, we will need an answer
So-
from the board. So be ready.
And that's something we'll get to, and with anything else, that's something that will have to be phased in.
But
Whether that,
here's the thing that I have. a
hold
problem with.
on.
Chair.
That's something that, you asked me a question, I'm trying to answer it.
Okay.
So that's something that the board will have to make the decision, just like anything else. That's something that will have to be phased in. So if there's something with the manufacturer, or there's a recall, or or they stop selling a headgear, the board will have to make a decision whether to rescind the item or to select a different item to be used, whether it meets ASTM standards or not. And once again, that's something they have to make the decision. I'm here as a talking piece for the board. I'm also a talking piece for this committee to the board. So it works as kind of the middle guy. But I can't sit here and predict what they're going to do because it changes from meeting to meeting depending on the information provided. If that makes sense.
It does make sense, but it's not practical. So let's say Cascade tells us, and mind you, this can happen. We're in an economy right now that anything can happen. We don't know. Let's say Cascade tomorrow goes, hey, we're no longer manufacturing helmets. What do we do?
And that's where we have to step in and make a decision on
But
what the
it can't be a phase. Like we have to be ready for it.
It could be because the items are already out there. At this point, Florida's the ones that are purchasing the items, correct? So they more than likely, the way manufacturers works is if they stop making the item is still does exist.
I understand. That's not my question.
Well, I know.
That's not my question though, but that's not my question. My question is, we need to put something in place if schools cannot obtain
Here's
the
the thing, you
helmets.
want me to create a plan right now for you for
No,
something
I don't want you to create a plan for me right
that
now. I
hasn't
want to have a
happened.
plan ready in, let's say, 90 days.
We're not gonna create a hypothetical plan for something that hasn't happened. So the way an organization works like this is if something happens, we react to those situations. If it gets to the point where Cascade stops making the headgear, our board will have to take action. What that action is what I don't know. Now there are options. Now, does that mean we immediately say, hey, headgears are rescinded? No, that doesn't mean that. That could mean we're shifting to this product, or we're going to go ahead and phase it out slowly. It could mean a multitude. It could be the item is optional for the next 4 years. It could mean a multitude of things, but the board has to make that decision.
I'm not asking for a decision. I'm not at all. I don't want you to do this tomorrow. I don't want you to do this the next day. I don't want the board to do this tomorrow or next day. I just want to be prepared. Just like, let's put hypothetically, right? I know you guys in the FHSAA prepares for when football happens, like, hey, what happens if this happens? And they are already with a decision within 24 hours. Seen it happen this year and during COVID, right? Like with these decisions that come up with concussions, with everything. All I'm asking for is to get a plan B so we won't have to be sitting around. So public schools that don't have a big system have to be running around looking at eBay for helmets or going to another manufacturer or going to a manufacturer, because I understand your point 100%, Alex. It's all bureaucracy. It's all this. But there's also guidelines and policies that we can add to our bylaws of lacrosse saying, if a manufacturer does not have this helmet or this is what we're going to go to. It's a plan B. I'm not.
I would put it like this.
Change.
I would put it like this. That plan B is a hypothetical, because at this point we have not heard from Cascade personally saying that they will discontinue anything.
Okay.
So for us to create a plan B on a hypothetical situation from hearsay, I don't think it's appropriate. We would have to hear from the manufacturers themselves for us to even consider doing any sort of alternative if this were to happen. At this point, from all indication we have received, it is still a go with the headgear in the state of Florida with Cascade. We've heard issues with Hummingbird. We have not heard any issues with Cascade whatsoever. And that's the point I'm making. We're not gonna, as a board, they're not gonna react to a hearsay situation. They're not going to create a plan B, a plan C, a plan D for something that they have not heard is occurring. So I think that would be definitely premature.
Yep. All right, so I motion
Well, we currently have a motion
have a
and a
motion on-
second
we
to
have a
approve the
motion.
item.
Yeah, we have a motion to approve, to rescind the helmet, policy. There was a second by Coach Jason. Now we discussed it and now there's a vote. Is there a new note? We still have the motion once again to rescind the helmet policy. Is
So
there
if
an
we-
aye?
if-
Motion to vote aye, everybody aye?
Yeah.
Yep,
No.
4 ayes have it to rescind the policy.
All right, I marked it down. So now at this point, it will go back to ADAC for their final endorsement or non-endorsement. Coach Herrera, I'll probably ask you during the ADAC meeting to come up here to Gainesville to present the item and have the discussion with ADAC so we can progress this recommendation.
Okay.
Do you know when that meeting will be?
I don't believe we have it set yet, but it will be normally it's during late August.
So what would that process look like? Coach Herrera goes up there with you, he presents the rescinding of the headgear. And what does it look like beyond that?
So as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, every item has a 2-year process. At this point, this is beyond 2 years for this specific item. So once ADAC reviews the item, they will endorse or not endorse the item. Then it goes to the FHA Board of Directors for final review. And I
does that-
don't have the dates for that because the calendar has not been set for next year yet.
Okay, so that would be in the fall, presumably?
Yes, sir.
If anybody
Okay, and
has
if-
any, sorry, Coach Jason, go ahead.
If the board then approves the rescinding of the headgear, when would that take effect?
It depends on what the board says. So
Ooh.
they have the ability to say immediately. They can gradually do it if that's the route they decide to go,
Okay, or make it optional?
or make
Presumably.
it optional. They essentially they can take any item and modify in however way, shape, or form they feel it's necessary.
Is there any chance I could be invited to that ADAC meeting as well?
Sure.
It's public. I think you can come. You
Yeah.
can, you can speak on behalf of this matter for me. You can take my time.
You can actually,
Okay,
if that's what you guys choose.
Yeah, if anybody has any documentation, Coach Garrett, Coach Lynn, you said you had those studies and everything. Let's bring them up and anything. And if we can get like a letter from Cascade or something saying that, we're gonna discontinue these helmets. I can tell you that we bought 20 helmets this year and I looked at the date of manufacture for the helmets and it was still 2020.
right.
So I don't think that, coming from a business background, if it's 2023 and you're still selling 2020 helmets, not looking very good. And that's why I wanted to have a plan. Okay, next item for old business is shooting space call. It was discussed. Let me see, where that's, okay. The recommendation was when the goal occurs, I think we tabled this last time.
No, it was approved last time.
Sorry, approved. Sorry. So we don't have to discuss that.
No, we would still have to come back up. We will still
Right.
need a motion in a second.
Sorry, so the motion, the recommendation was to, when the goal occurs at the same time as a shooting space call, the goal should be allowed. This should follow the college rules and goal. Now, if this was new business, Alex, why are we bringing it up again when it was approved?
This is old business.
I'm sorry, but it was new business at our last meeting and now it's
Yeah,
old business.
Now it's
Why do
old
we have-
business.
So that's like,
So this is the second year of this is part of that 2-year review.
this is part of
so-
the 2-year review.
Correct. This is the second year of the item. So now it needs to be reviewed by this committee, approved, denied based on feedback received. And then it gets voted on this committee again, goes back to ADAC for endorsement or not endorsement, then it goes back to the board. Like I said at the beginning of the meeting, It's a 2-year process for every item.
Yeah, I know you said that at the beginning of the meeting. I did not know that it was that we discussed this twice in the same meeting. I'm not familiar with that. Because I think what I'm used to is for a 2-year review. It just seems like we're delaying all of this every year when we can have 2 meetings a year, and those are our 2 reviews instead of having a 2-year review.
We have an annual meeting every year as one committee.
I understand that.
So what you're saying though, and correct me if I'm wrong, you would rather restructure the process to have 2 meetings a year, but that's not how it's done. It's a 2-year, and this is across the board in all committees, all sports. They go through the same 2-year process. The purpose of it is when something is introduced and approved, it needs to sit a year so people can talk, review, think about it, how would it impact, so on and so forth, before it's completely implemented and has a negative impact that might be unforeseen. So every item goes through this 2-year process unless the board or the executive director feels the item is an immediate safety item. At that point, he or she has the ability to fast track an item and it'll forego the 2-year process.
Is there a motion to approve the shooting space call to move forward with approving the shooting space call to be similar to follow the college rules and be a goal with shooting space?
I'll make that motion.
Coach Darren made the motion. Coach Jason seconded the motion. Any discussion on this?
So ADAC did not endorse this item, and I believe the reason was they felt that this could be a safety issue when it comes to athletes, purposely jumping in front, or when they see the student face violation, just shooting anyways without regard for the safety of the other student athlete. The onus of not shooting is on the shooter per the rules. So they felt, and this is their committee, they felt that this can cause more injuries and more harm if adjusted. That was their direct feedback.
In talking with another coach, a local coach that I know, he was concerned that coaches would just encourage their players just to shoot more dangerously. Basically what you were saying, Alex.
And just to point out, ADAC does not kill an item, so they did not endorse it. And if it goes back to the next meeting and they don't endorse it, that doesn't mean the item is dead. That just means that's whether they put their stamp of approval or not before it goes to the board. So if you do see that, don't get discouraged on that regard. But that is, I want to point out, that was the feedback they provided as to why it was not endorsed.
Coach,
who's ADAC?
It's currently on our website. I don't have all the names in front of me, but it's comprised of athletic directors in different sections of the state, as well as members of the FIAAA, which is the Florida Administrative Association, as well as FACA, the Florida Coaches Athletic Association.
Okay, thank
but
you.
They are athletic directors who are member schools of the FHSAA.
Coach Darren, any input on the shooting space?
No, other than, I'm all in favor of trying to move the high school game as close to the college game as possible, just to prepare, those girls that want to go forward. So I like the idea. I feel like it's already been somewhat implemented.
Right.
I think one of the points of emphasis the last 2 years was, the dangerous follow through. Not dangerous. If the shooting space was called and our shooter still made the shot or attempted the shot, they were calling that in lieu of the shooting space, at least up here. So I don't know. I wasn't on the committee or part of this when it was first brought up, but I'm in support of it.
I echo Coach Darren's comments. And actually Coach Lynn's comments as well, because of dangerous. So it's like kind of like I'm 50-50.
I think there's merits to both sides of the argument, but it's just a matter of what the preference is, I guess, of the committee and of the folks voting on it. But I think there's definitely merits to both.
Well, we have a motion on the floor we have a motion on the floor to continue the process of moving the goal of approving the shooting space call to mirror that of college lacrosse. All in favor, raise your hand. I just raised my hand. So 4-0.
So, and just as a FYI, I probably should have said during the discussion, this is an NFHS rule, so it's actually outside of our jurisdiction. However, we do have the ability to modify NFHS rules. In doing so, especially playing rules, that does take away the state of Florida's ability to be part of that rules committee in the future. But that's not a big deal. We do it in other sports. With that said, one suggestion may be, especially when you're having any sort of discussion about mirroring college rules, because we follow high school rules, one suggestion I would add to folks is to submit items for change through the NFHS. Because that committee, what ends up happening if a coach in the state of Florida submits something through their NFHS portal for a college rule, rule change, it gets kicked back to us, and then our office either puts our stamp of approval or not, and then they make a decision up on a national level and gets inserted into the rules book. And if it's inserted into the rules book, we follow it automatically. If that makes sense. So this discussion, what would happen, let's say we go through it, it's approved all the way through, we would change it. It doesn't change the high school rule across the nation. It only would change it for our state as a modified rule of what they provide, if that makes sense. Just kind of want to give you some insight, and there are different ways of getting, especially when looking at mirroring NCAA rules or college rules compared to, or USA lacrosse rules compared to NFHS rules. Sometimes when it comes to game rules, a better process may be through the NFHS.
Okay. Our third item up for old business is the playoff warming up. The playoff warm-up schedule is to add an additional 20 minutes to pregame warm-up schedule. The amended recommendation was to allow 40 minutes pregame warm-up on the competition field. Additional time may be added if mutually agreed by both head coaches prior to the game. Is there a motion to pass this recommendation to the ADCA?
I'll make that motion.
Coach Darren Johnson made the motion. Is there any discussion, or are we all in agreement on this?
Is there a second? Sorry.
I'm sorry. Is there a second? Sorry, Coach Lynn, second. Is there
And as you can see, it was endorsed by ADAC 11-3. I think the three dissenting votes were concerning about timing. They felt it might be a little long, but as it was still majority, quite a bit of majority voted to endorse it.
Darren, I have a question about that. Right, the ADAC said they felt it was a little too long. My worry when you say that is the ADAC out of touch with the sport of girls lacrosse? Because if we put this together, right, with another sport that has 12 players on the field, that the field is 100 to 140 yards, shouldn't those players have the same warm-up schedule? That's my concern, is that when you say something like they had concern over time, right? Are they not in tune with what the sport of girls lacrosse is? That's
See, I disagree with that outlook of it. This is similar. This is not much different than any other sport. They all do have the same time schedule. And what I keep reminding coaches is this is it's a guideline. It's a pregame guideline if no one can agree. If there's a mutual agreement to extend the time, you can do so as of right now. As long as there's communication. The important thing is it's created so if there is fair and equity between both parties. Because a lot of times what it used to happen, and this is well before my time, before this was put in place, is that the home school would hog the field and not allow any time for the visiting school. So this was created so that both schools have equitable amount of time on the field pre-game before the game starts to warm up and stretch out and do whatever needs to be done to prepare for the contest. And this is no different than the sport of soccer. I think no different than basketball, volleyball, that they all have some sort of pre-game schedule in place. Can it be extended? This is what we're here for. Yes, if we want to make it extended for everyone. I think the concern was 40 minutes too long, due to travel patterns, so on and so forth during the state series. I think that's where it lies. But as of right now, if both teams are in agreement, no one has any issue if they want to take 2 hours on the field.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments on that? No. All right. Vote to approve the allowing 40 minutes pregame schedule as recommended by the board and the ADAC. Everybody says yes. Okay, on to new business. Let me pull this up. Okay, new business. This was a rule change submitted by Coach, or I think she's a coach, Krista Graber. I hope whichever one of those. Sorry. The rule reference is the yellow card releasable. The recommendation is to yellow cards have been handed out so frequently, completely change the game, releasing a player after a goal on a yellow per college rules.
Do we need a motion or do we discuss it?
I think, no, we
need a
don't.
motion. We need a motion in a second before we discuss.
Okay, is there a motion to discuss this new business?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion
Is that-
made by Coach Jason, seconded by Coach Darren.
I just need point of clarification. Is that a motion to approve or deny the item?
Is there a motion to approve to discuss the item to change the rules to have yellow cards, to have players released after a goal is scored if they have a yellow card per the college rules?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Motion to approve by Coach Jason. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Coach Johnson. And now it's up for discussion.
I know a little bit about the background to why Krista submitted this. We've had a number of games this last season and the second season where, some teams at the end have ended up being 2, possibly 3 girls down by the end of the game. So there's been a whole lot of yellow cards. I do think, given where the game's going, again, sort of echoing my comment earlier, and again, I can't remember specifically when the cards become unreleasable in the per NCAA rules, but I think following that, having some idea, maybe Coach Lynn speak to it. I think it's 4. Is it 4 when they become?
Yes.
I think mirroring that to some extent would be, really move the game forward. And obviously, I'll just leave it at that.
Darren, just so I can, I'm trying to wrap around what you just said. So is that different than what's being presented now, what you mentioned?
No. I think what Coach Krista, her intent, and I agree with it. So we'll have, you have the first yellow 2 minutes. And the other team scores normal right now in our game, unreleasable. So they're
Yeah.
up for a full 2 minutes.
Correct.
In the college game, which echoes sort of, the men's game, if you score, then you're back to even. And I mean, that's the whole intent behind the penalty, is give that team that advantage. They've achieved it, move on. If there's repeat, number of fouls, then obviously it becomes unreleasable at some point. And then we still have the 2 yellows per player. They're out for the game anyway.
Yeah. Now, what I guess I need cleared on is, you mentioned, you said in the NCAA they have a rule where if you accumulate 4, it becomes releasable after that.
Unreleasable.
Unreleasable.
Unreleased. I got you. Maybe I heard that wrong. Sorry. Okay, I got you.
Yeah,
Now I'm on the
sorry.
same page. Gotcha.
I echo Coach Darren's comment from earlier. If we can get these games as close as possible to college rules without hindering the safety of players, and I don't think this one is a safety issue, because I coached a girls club lacrosse team, and it kind of often got me confused because they used the releasable, and I was like, and then I would go coach my high school team, and it's like, go, and it's like, no, I don't think this is a penalty. I think this is a rule that actually helps the game to be more like club, if the players go play intramural or club lacrosse at their colleges or play for their schools.
I also
So-
think it's just, it's a fairness thing too.
Okay.
I think in fairness, I think the way it works out when it is releasable, at least for the first couple, just makes the game move much better, and fairness in general.
So my question is, are we going to then amend it to be that, because I don't think college has to play man down if they get more than 4 cards.
They do not. No, they
Right,
can
so
get,
like, that's my question, is that, are we going to do that as well? And if so, I don't think I'm necessarily in favor of that.
Can you specify what you're not in favor of?
I think that if a team is being, like, I'm fine with it being releasable until the 4th card. But if you're getting that many yellows, like, just having it being unreleasable isn't, sorry, I'm like losing myself here. Isn't, I don't know, I just,
There isn't a penalty for it, like.
right. Like,
Yeah.
we'll just keep fouling because all we have to do is spend 2 minutes in the box, and
Especially if a team is superior than the other team, they're like, or not, or I don't know.
well, yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah, if a team, it's
But
like,
like, that's my question, was that in the rule, like, that we would play man down as well, or not play man down?
Well, the way it's written here, it's not. It's pretty straightforward the way it's written. It's just
So just
becomes-
releasable or
it becomes
unreleasable?
releasable. Yeah.
Then I'm
It-
fine with
it's
that.
it's not open, or it doesn't mirror, I guess, what the NCAA
Exactly.
does, which with the 4-player becomes unreleasable. If
Right.
that's the route the committee wants to go, then we would have to modify this item to include that.
so right now, the college rule, Darren, you seem like I'm sorry, you seem like you know a little bit more about it than myself. Is the college rule is yellow card, team scores, releasable. You get 4 of those, and then after 4 of those, you no longer, if you get a 5th, right, it is not releasable. So that player is staying there for the entire 2 minutes.
that's my understanding. Yes, sir.
Okay. I just think we should, if we're all in favor of it, we should just mimic the college rule. Word for
Well,
word.
I think no, because I think that gets into what Coach Lynn's concern is. So, in our rules, up to the 4, so at the 4th card, you are girl down, woman down for the rest
Right.
of the game.
Right.
So I echo that we need to continue that, even though there's been some situations, recently in North Central Florida where it's been an issue, but that goes to officiating. So I think we need to continue that, because otherwise I agree, you're incentivizing, very rough play, but I'm just saying up to, and we can even modify it to say, we don't have to necessarily say up to 4 cards. We could say, we could recommend the first 2 cards, would be releasable upon the other team scoring. Again, make it complicated a little bit. But just a thought. I don't know what to add to that. Go ahead. Sorry.
All right, no worries. Thank you. Coach Jason?
Excuse me, I apologize. Yeah, I don't want to complicate it any more than what it is. I just think that simply stating that, the first 4 are releasable and then keeping the rule the same.
Yeah, I think that's a way to go. Keep it simple.
I agree.
Okay.
That being said, that's not what the recommendation says.
Yeah, so now,
So we need to modify.
what we need to do is, we need to vote on this, but not like this motion has to be denied so we can amend it, correct?
No.
No, okay, so we just.
Did I-
is there a
So
motion-
here's how we're gonna do it.
Motion to
So
amend, right?
yes, we have
Okay.
to amend the recommendation,
Amend the
have a motion
recommendation.
and a second, vote on amending it. And then we're back to the original discussion. Then we already have a motion and a second, and then we vote again
Okay,
on the item.
Yeah.
Hopefully that makes sense.
oh yeah, so we're
Okay.
amending the recommendation we just voted. We're voting to amend we're voting to amend the recommendation of the yellow cards being released per college rules, yellow cards being releasable to the following. We are going to amend, the yellow cards have been, releasing a player after a goal is scored on a yellow card. Teams will only, this will only be for the first 4 yellow cards. And then the following yellow cards, players will have to finish the entire 2-minute penalty throughout the game, correct? Are we good there? Everybody's okay with that?
Yep.
1 second. So the first 4 are releasable cards. After that, the rule stays the same. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Is there a second for that amendment? Is there a motion to approve that amendment?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Coach Jason, seconded by Coach Lynn,
Yeah.
seconded by Coach Lynn. Vote. I thought you said yes. I was like,
Yeah.
is there a vote for this to move on through to the ADAC for discussion? 4 ayes, 4 yeses.
So that vote was specific to amending the recommendation
Sorry.
for a releasable file for the first 4.
Okay,
So
so
now we're back to what our original discussion. And now if you want to have more further discussion, we can. If not, we can vote
okay.
on what we've already motioned and second.
Okay, if there are no further discussions, I open to vote to move the amended yellow card rule releasable discussion to the ADCA. Everybody
second that.
in favor, raise your hand. 4 ayes, we're good. I'm looking at the agenda here, and I kind of want to. I see that we have revising how seating done is playoffs is done, FHSAA power rankings, release of rankings. I think that because seating is done through FHSAA power rankings, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I want a motion to discuss first items B and C and then A. I think.
Hold
in
on one
regards to-
second before we go, that these items are all discussion at this point, so that we no longer have to motion and second for these items. The item, the new agenda and the old business and new business are the only ones that we have to do that for. Now we can just have just an open discussion, take notes, so
Oh,
on and so
I
forth.
was just, I didn't know, for Robert's rules, don't we have to motion to move items to discuss like in order?
Yes, if you want to readjust the agenda, that being
Because
said, that should have been done at the beginning when we went through the whole process, but that's okay. Look,
I mean,
we're not,
in the
if you
process-
want to discuss item B before item A,
I think we should
just-
discuss BCA.
just go ahead and say it, yeah.
Okay, I just think we should
Just go ahead,
discuss-
Clay,
I
we
just
can do
think we should go
that.
BCA and for the preference of time, because that way
Yeah.
we know what we're talking with revising, because we don't know what you're gonna bring up, so.
Gotcha. So I'm good with that, but
Okay.
at this point, as a chairperson, if you want to do that, let's go ahead and do it that way.
Okay. All right, so Alex, if you want to talk about the FHSAA power rankings.
All right, so this item, let me just make sure I'm at the right one, because there's a couple ones regarding seating. You said B, right?
Yes.
So, okay, this item is looking at point differential. So this is something that actually has already passed through several other sport committees in the fall and in the winter. And it has gone through the 2-year process, and it now sits on the board. It went to the board I want to say in February. And one of the things they asked, and in April, twice now, and they asked that this item go to every single team sport committee for review, because it's something that's going to impact every single team sport. So they want to get the thoughts and opinions of every team sport. So what this item is asking is to create a point differential to add to part of the ranking formula or equation. Currently, if you go to the MaxPrep website and you look at their rankings, theirs has a component of point differential embedded in theirs. Ours does not. Our power rankings are a modified version of the MaxPrep rankings. One of those modifications was that we took away point differential, and the other one is that we include forfeitures where MaxPreps does not include forfeitures. So what this item is asking is to implement a point differential with a cap number. For example, soccer, when they did this, they wanted to add the point differential of 4 goals. So basically, if you beat a team by 1, 2, 3, or 4 goals, you'll get additional points added to your rankings. Anything beyond 4, there's no additional bonus points added. Basketball, I want to say they did a was it 15 point differential, and I think the common themes for all the ones we saw is whatever the mercy rule is, they cut it about in half, and that way it adds a little bit more value to a particular win. So if, let's say, you manhandle a team, and flip it back to lacrosse, you beat a team by 12 goals, you don't get credit for the 12 goals, you'll get credit for 6 if that's the number you choose. It does cap it at a number, but the biggest feedback we received, and through these conversations I have regarding rankings, is, hey, we beat this team by XYZ, why are we not ranked higher than them? This brings that part of that conversation to it. Now, obviously, there's a flip side to that, which is sportsmanship. Running up scores, so on and so forth. There's a reason why we asked MaxPreps to take that piece out of the equation. That's because we were concerned with folks running up scores purposely, thinking that they had to get a better rating. But I think that's also where the cap comes in. If you're still going to have these issues, though, because you'll definitely have coaches who might not be fully informed and know that there's a point differential component, and they'll run up the score not knowing what the cap is. So you'll have these issues, but I think the premise is they want to refine the rankings as much as possible, to showcase the most accurate and appropriate rankings based on what happens on the field.
So really quick summary, what's going on here is, let's just say team A beats team B by 20 points, 20-0. They will only get credit for 5 goals.
Correct.
If we decide to go on split the mercy rule.
Correct. And what I need from this committee, essentially is an unofficial vote. Whether, really a couple of things, whether or not you like the item. If this is something the committee feels is appropriate, 1. 2, if you do think it's appropriate, what would that an appropriate cap would be? Like I said, so far what we've seen other team sports have done who have liked the item is cap it at around the halfway point of the mercy rule. So for instance, this would be 6 in this sport. It was 6 for boys lacrosse. It was 4 for soccer, about 15 for basketball, so on and so forth. So those are the things I kind of need, the feedback I need from this committee to send back to the FSA board. That way they can make a better determination whether or not this should be implemented.
Coach Lynn?
I'm on the receiving end of both of them. Like, my team can beat teams by 20 and my team can lose teams by 20. I hate beating teams by that much. And I think it's probably good for sportsmanship. And like I told you guys before, I want to see as many kids play. And if I'm beating a team by 20, they lose, their will to play. And I hate seeing that. So I'm for it.
Coach Darren?
I'm sorry, Coach Lynn, you were for it, or?
Yeah,
not for it?
I am for it.
Yeah, I would echo Coach Lynn's comments.
So if you're for, what would a cap look like in your mind?
Well, our mercy is 10, so if
10,
you said
yeah.
half, it would be 5.
5.
But that's up to everybody else.
Yeah. And like I said, the prevailing thought was halfway of the mercy rule, but that doesn't mean that that's the right number. But that's just what it's been done. Definitely just want to give you all the information that I have to this point, so you guys can make an informed decision.
I guess my question is, what's the actual effect to the ranking?
So the best way I can say is if you look at the difference between what we have compared to what Max Preps has, that would be the actual effect, because that's a major difference between the 2 rankings. And from what I see, we're talking about, for the most part, just a few ranking spots off. It doesn't change it that much, but where it gets important is like when you're looking at that last seed or that last team going into the playoffs. That
Right.
can mean the difference between you making it and not making it.
So to use an example, there's a team that's in a neighboring district, and their schedule was light, and we're ranked fairly high because of it. And they just, and they were their schedule in itself, the way it was built, gave them that higher ranking, which even that by default put them into regionals when they weren't necessarily that there was other teams that were definitely more worthy of that regional opportunity. So I guess that would be my concern is that if I'm going to build a schedule that's light for the intention of producing a higher ranking to get in to be one of the 8 getting into regionals, then you got teams, and that goes to the rankings questions in itself and the algorithm and the true transparency around that algorithm, because the way that it's weighted, to me, doesn't look like the way it's portrayed. You're incentivized as a coach to build a lighter schedule.
So the way I would explain it, and the reason this ranking came about is it's kind of the same thing. The purpose is for each coach, each school to create a schedule that fits the caliber of their student athlete. Whether that means, if you're a more competitive team, you schedule a little bit more competitively. If you're a more novice or more in the beginning stage, and obviously from school to school, this can fluctuate as the years progress, you schedule, to match the level of those student athletes. Where before in the past, when we had a mandatory district schedule, you didn't have that choice, that
Right.
ability. So it was created to allow coaches more flexibility to do that. With that in mind, what I would tell you is, when it comes to these rankings, regardless of your strength, winning is number one. So you want to definitely create a schedule where you can win. Whether if you have a lighter or a more novice team, create a lighter schedule or easier schedule where they're able to be successful. If you have a more competitive team, create a schedule where it's going to be harder, but they're still able to be successful. If you're in the middle of the road, maybe create a mixed schedule where you have teams there where you think you can beat, but you also have more competitive nature to it, where you're actually able to compete and prepare yourself for the playoffs. That is the goal of what we wanted as an association. And that's also what the rankings is forcing people to do. And yes, you do see situations where people schedule a lot lighter, and they're able to make the playoffs because they're winning. At the end of the day, they're winning games. What this recommendation does, it kind of narrows the gap just a little bit, where if you're scheduling lighter but barely winning these games, that will reflect that. If you're scheduling tough and you're winning games significantly, it will reflect that as well, and it's going to reward that as well. At the end of the day, though, it doesn't change the fact that it's multiplying your strength of schedule to your opponents. So if you're losing, it's going to be a negative multiplier. If you're winning, it's going to be a positive multiplier. That's still going to be in effect. So the difference is you're going to have a little bit of a bonus bump if you're winning these games by whatever the cap is.
With the coaches here, this question for the coaches. This is my second year doing this, so I don't know much about, all this stuff. Are any of you familiar with how the power rankings are done? Like, is there do we know what the do you guys know what the formulas are?
Well, I think that's the concern, is the transparency around
Okay.
exactly that.
It's okay. So that's what I gathered from, the last meeting that I was at. It was said that a couple coaches discussed the frustration of that we actually don't know what the formula is of the power rankings. Before I speak on this, or even give my opinion, to be honest, I need to know what the formula is for the power rankings. As a coach, I know that I play teams that I lost to 19-9 in regular season, and then I beat them in the playoffs 11-10, and my rankings went down for some reason. And I had no idea. Before I personally like to get all the information before I can make a vote on how this power ranking things change. Alex, is there a way that we can get what the memo on how the power rankings are done with girls lacrosse, from A to Z?
So the simple answer to that is no. And because of the reason that it being, I also don't know what it is.
Not acceptable.
I know.
It's not acceptable.
I hear you,
This
but
is
hold on,
public
hold on,
request.
hold on. If you ask me a question, you gotta let me answer.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
The simple answer is no, is because we also don't know the formula. It is a proprietary algorithm created by Max Preps. They do not share that with anyone, including our office. We have no idea what it's made up of. With that said, I hear what you're saying, and this is also the same concerns other sport committees have. On the flip side, knowing the formula doesn't always mean a positive, because knowing the formula allows coaches, yeah, I know, I see that face. Knowing the formula, a lot of times allows coaches to manipulate. I'll give you an example. Football did not have the max stretch rankings. They had their own algorithm that was created in-house. It was an RPI formula, and it was changed for 3, 4, 5 years in a row because coaches were manipulating it, were figuring out how it worked, and at the end of the season canceling games because they knew if I played this game, it'll be detrimental to me, so I'm going to cancel this game. Because of that, the coaches voted 2 years ago to just go ahead and jump on the max preps formula without knowing the algorithm, because it was becoming more detrimental than beneficial to know the algorithm. And I know that's not exactly what you want to hear, but that was a fact. Coaches were actually manipulating how schedules were being done at the end of the season, canceling games, because they knew that what type of impact playing that game would be. And it was becoming more of a detriment. But at the end of the day, we do not know the formula. When we came into this endeavor with the rankings, it was with the understanding of not knowing the formula. I can do my best to interpret situations. So if you have a specific issue, let me know, and I can try and interpret as much as I can for you, but I do not know how things are weighed, what's the main factor. I don't know the meats and bones of it.
Okay, that just seems unacceptable, and that someone, that we're relying on a company to do something that we don't know what they're doing, and I mean, it doesn't make sense to me whatsoever, because it could be someone back there paying, hey, there's no accountability there. So a team can be paying someone off to get their stuff. I mean, I don't know.
I think that's a little far-fetched, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
But can it happen if we don't know what the formula is? Can it happen?
No.
Okay.
No.
Can I ask a question? And
Yeah.
I'm sorry if this is super simple, but so if FHSSA doesn't know the algorithm, how do you ask Max Preps to do a separate ranking for the playoffs? Because obviously the rankings for FHSSA are different than the final Max Preps, or do you ask them to take something out of the algorithm, such as strength of schedule? But how do you all calculate that, I guess?
So that's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. So essentially the way it works out is that they have their rankings, and we don't know the formula, but they give us the categories. And this is where we're kind of at with the modified version of the rankings. One of the things that they do is they currently do point differential on their rankings. And that's one of the things we said, hey, we don't want that. We perceive it as a sportsmanship issue, so take that out. They do not calculate forfeitures. We want to calculate forfeitures in case of situations that people last minute cancellations, so on and so forth, where there's disagreements, so on, or ineligible players being used. What say you? So we want those forfeitures to be counted. They do not count those. So there are categories that we know are there. How they mix together is what we don't know. I can tell you that what it's looking at is looking at your strength of schedule, your opponent's strength of schedule, that team's opponent's strength of schedule, those teams, and it's doing that in an infinite amount of times to give you back a rating score. And part of that rating score, or part of that strength of schedule, it's looking at whether or not you won. And if you did win, it's giving you a positive 10 points. If you lost that game, it's giving you a negative 10 points. And then it's multiplying that throughout your entire schedule against that school's strength of schedule. The tricky part of that is that's a constantly moving number, because every time somebody plays, that number is adjusted, and it does that an infinite amount of times. But that's essentially I guess that's a simplified version of what it's doing in a more complicated formula. We don't know what the weights are, what's weighted more than the other. We don't know any of that, but we do know the small components that go into it.
Okay, so there's not, like you hear about the, BCS and all that. There's no, room over there, filled with pizza boxes. You guys locked in, looking at lax numbers with the old. hold back
It-
power or anything
the
like?
the thing, I actually am the one who runs all the rankings for our association for every single sports. So every single Monday night at 10 o'clock at night, I sit there at home, hit a button to generate the rankings for every single sport. So there is no sitting down adjusting a ranking. So it is a computerized algorithm that takes in the data that was inputted throughout the season and spits out a result.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm sorry if
Yeah.
that was, everybody else knew that but me.
I didn't know, Darren, either. I didn't know much about these rankings. And, you know, it's just, I like to keep transparent and know exactly what, you know, as a committee member before voting on something, what I'm voting on. You know, get all the information, and unfortunately, it's a tough subject for me, because when someone says private proprietary information in regards to public schools and public meetings and public everything, it doesn't sit well with me. That's I have to say that in record, because it's 2023 and it's transparency is the number one thing. So I think that we can do better, and we can find a more transparent way of doing this. But that's just my 2 cents on the rules. I echo the statements of all the coaches regarding, and I follow their lead on the power ranking point differential. To move forward, we all want to move forward with the discussion on this, correct? Yeah, so yeah, everybody, I guess we're moving it on to old business for next year.
No, this
This is not a 2-year process.
this is just a discussion. This was
Okay.
just a discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
But are these point differentials going to be done in 2 years? Or to be changed?
That I don't have an answer for that, because it really depends on what the board wants to do after receiving the feedback. But if they decide after receiving all the feedback that they want to move forward, then yes, it would be something that will be adjusted for next season. But I think it would be, and actually that may be premature. Hold on, let me think things through. I'm trying to think of the committees who've already seen it. I actually think the spring sports are the first ones to see it, other than the ones who've already gone through the process. So I believe volleyball in the fall did not see this. So it would depend if we're able to get their feedback prior to the next board meeting, which is in June. If that's the case, then yes. If they feel that the need to approve it, then yes, it would be inputted. If they feel the need not to do it based on the other feedback, the other sports committees, then the answer would be no. So it could go one of both ways, but this committee is going a long way to providing that feedback for them.
Well, you know. All right, next item for discussion is the release of rankings. Alex, you have the floor.
Yes, so this came from the Volleyball Advisory Committee. And once again, this has gone through the 2-year process through their committee and now sits on the board, and the board pushed it back and said, hey, we want to get the feedback of the other sport committees before we move forward, because it will impact everyone. So what this is asking, it's asking 2 things. We currently have a policy in place that states that all scores for the previous week have to be submitted by Monday at 5 p.m. of the following week. So it's asking to adjust that policy to state all results have to be submitted within 24 hours of a contest. That's the first piece. The second piece, they want to adjust that to allow multiple rankings during the week. Right now, we release rankings Tuesday because we expect results to be submitted by Monday at 5 p.m. from the previous week. So we start about the 5th week of the season. We'll release rankings every Tuesday morning or afternoon. And we do that just because the policy is in place. So it's really asking for 2 things. So what the board wants to know is this something that this committee is in favor of, adjusting that policy to state a 24-hour submission period versus having to do it, by Monday of the following week. And if if that is adjusted, would you want to see rankings multiple times instead of just once?
The recommendation is to require game scores to be reported within 24 hours of game start time and have HSSA rankings released at least twice a week. Up for discussion. I'll start with Coach Darren.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, Coach Jason,
I like the adjustment.
Coach Lynn,
I'm kind of indifferent. One way or the other, doesn't bother me.
okay, I'm indifferent as well. It doesn't impact the game, so.
I mean, I look at them, I care, but I.
Yeah.
I think the concern of, I think, was it volleyball, was that at least they're able, they don't know the algorithm, but they're able to see it more often to see how quickly things change. And versus having, 6, 7 games or 4 or 5 games, whatever, volleyball plays a little bit more games in the season or in the week than lacrosse, but having a set amount of games and then not knowing how each game impacted. If they get it multiple times a week, they're able to see, I played 2 games here, I won both, this was the impact, I lost this one, won this one, here's my rating score or my strength of schedule, this is how it impacted me. They're able to see it more. I think that was their logic.
So my concern would be, let's going back to canceling games at the last minute. If like you're where you think you are, and then if you where you want to be, like, why would I play another game that I might lose late in this season? You see what I'm saying? Like
that is
that's
definitely a
my
concern. That is
Yeah.
definitely a concern. But I mean, this is what they voted for. I mean, I agree.
I believe everybody's okay with moving forward to move this on. Yeah.
Sorry.
All right. And
All
I
right,
will
next.
definitely provide that feedback to the board and let them make that decision how they see fit.
Next item on the roundtable discussion is revising how seating is done in the playoff by Coach Krista Graber. I want to say, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. She is not here, but from what the item description is, she believes that the seating district winners 1 through 4 and then at large 5 through 8. That's all the information I have here. I leave it up for discussion.
So as some background, that's what we did, not this past year, but the year before. That's exactly the structure it was and what it used to be, is the top 4 seeds were all district winners. The next 4 seeds of 5 through 8 were at-large bids. And then we seeded them as such, 1 versus 8, 4 versus 5, 2, 7, 3, 6. The issue of why this was changed, and this came through multiple sport committees, and we did review it in this committee, just like we reviewed these other items that were passed by other sports. The issue was the 4-5 matchup, and then that 5th seed. The 5th seed ends up being, depending on, and it changes from bracket to bracket, but depending on the bracket, they're the highest rated non-district winner. At times, they are the highest rated or seeded team. Sorry, seed is the wrong word. Ranked team in that bracket. Sometimes they're the 2nd highest ranked teams. And what you end up happening in the semifinal round is you have the 2 best teams in that bracket meeting up. So the board, the different sport committees, and even this sport committee at the time agreed that that's the issue that needed to be adjusted. And just for some more quick background, when this item was presented, it did not include the what we do now, which is during the first round only, the district champion, anytime they meet at large bid, that district champion hosts regardless of seeding. It did not include that piece. The board added that piece at their level. What it did say is teams, if you win a district, it gets you a ticket to the tournament. And then teams are seeded 1 through 8 based on rankings. What the board did is they felt through feedback and other methods of people that were there, they felt that there needs to be another additional reward added to the district winners. So they added the caveat that during the district round or during the first round only, a team that meets a district champion that meets a runner-up will host that game. And then from there on out, the highest seeded team would host. So that is the main difference in how we got to this point. So what she's asking is to revert back to what we used to do, which is the top 4 seeds are district champions. The next 4 seeds are at large bids.
I like how we did it this year. I think it does, you're going to have very strong districts and you're going to have weaker districts. So, in those stronger districts where you've got 2 or possibly 3 really good teams and the top 2 play, I think it still reflects that, that team that may have been the runner-up in their district that played a great schedule and, they're still being recognized by not necessarily automatically dropping down 5 through 8. They can be seated accordingly. With that being said, I appreciate you giving the background. I like the small reward in the first, because selfishly, we were the recipient of that. We were in a weak district, won our district, were seated lower, but we still got to host that first round. So I personally, in my opinion, I think it worked well this year. And obviously, there's going to be situations and regions where there's still going to be the appearance that it wasn't fair, but I think the way it worked out this year, at least up here in whatever region we are, region 1 or whatever it is, it worked out really fairly. If you look at the teams and the rankings and how everything worked out, I think it worked out well.
Coach Lynn?
So I was that team last year where I was the 4 seed and the 5 seed should have been, like, we probably should have gone 3 hours to them. I was thrilled that we got to play them at my place, instead of going to them. So I think district champions should get to host. I can't, I'm in a weak district. That's no fault of my school, it's just the way it is. And I don't know, I think you should get some for winning your district. That's how I feel.
Coach Jason?
Yeah, I mean, so how does the at-large bid actually work?
So essentially what happens is once the 4 district champions are determined, you just take the next 4 highest ranked teams in that region.
That's what we're doing now, correct?
That's what we're doing now. And that's what that did in the past too. But the difference is once you identify the 4 district champions and the 4 at large, in the past, those 4 district champions will be seeds 1 through 4 based on their rankings, no matter what. And then the next highest 4 teams in that region will be 5 through 8. Now we're saying, okay, here are the 8 teams. The 4 district champions is 4 at large. Now they're seeded 1 through 8 based on their rankings altogether. And if there are any pairings that has a district and a at-large team together, that district host, regardless of their seeding, whether they're lower or not, is hosting that game in the first round only.
Okay.
So you're still the components are still the same. It's just kind of how you put them together.
It's the 1 through 8 ranking.
Yeah.
So I like the way it is now.
And to be fair, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer for this. I think it's more of a preference. I think the reason we have that caveat in the first round is because I think everyone agrees that there needs to be some type of reward for winning districts.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think on the flip side, people are still saying, well, we agree, but there's still a component where there are stronger districts or are weaker districts. And to get the best matchups at the regional finals, state semifinals, state finals, you need to seed them appropriately.
I would
where the
agree.
teams are not, you're not getting those matchups in the earlier round. So it's trying to mesh those two concepts together. It's hard because they're two competing concepts. So this is kind of the board's best way of doing that.
I like how it's done now. If I guess we're all in agreement to move this forward to the next steps.
Well, this was just discussion, so
Just
we'll make note.
discussion.
I'll make note in the minutes of what was discussed here, that the committee is in favor. It's currently being done.
Okay. Sounds good. Next time on the agenda, required statistics, Alex Azuna.
Okay, so this came, hold on one second, let me finish typing this. So this item came from the soccer advisory committee. This is a little bit more of a complicated item, given the fact that the committee itself doesn't necessarily want to do this, but felt that they needed to do this for their sake. So what they're asking here is, currently, as some background, every team, every school is required to submit their statistics on during each round of the playoffs, leading into district, all the season statistics. Then once you win, as you progress through the playoffs, you submit each round. Once you get to the finals, everything should be submitted. If you fail to do so, there's a $300, up to $300 fine assessed to each school who failed to do so by the given deadline, so on and so forth. That's the current rule. What this is asking is to modify the rule to state that failure to submit stats is a $250 fine per occurrence. On top of that, after a second occurrence, not only do you get a $250 fine, you also the coach will receive a level 1 suspension, which would be next year a 1-game suspension. The reason they stated this is because a lot of times half the schools or a number of schools will submit the stats, another number would not, because they would just prefer just to pay the fine versus disclosing their statistical stats. The committee itself, full disclosure, will prefer the rule to be removed altogether. That was their initial preference, but stated, if this rule is going to be in place, it needs to have some teeth. It needs to force people to actually do it. And this was their method of doing that. Now, just like some of the other things I brought up, this was something that has gone through the course. It went through the 2 sports committee meetings as well as the ADAC and has gone up to the board. The board has kicked it back and asked what are the opinions of the other sports, because it would impact all sports, not just soccer.
Point of clarification here.
Yep.
What is, so if it's already gone through the process, this would be for next year?
It would.
Okay. I can start on this. I actually brought this up to my AD because he expects us to put in stats for our school. And I told him that this year I was not putting in stats because I pretty much look at stats and I put a player in front of their best goal scorer, to be honest with you. And I think this is fair. This, either no one submits stats or everyone submits stats, because I literally, my players knew exactly who to face guard, who was going to shoot the ball, who was going to score, and they, face guarded them to no return, and I think it's a fair advantage to have everybody put in the stats. Is it a pain in the butt? Yep. But it has to be done, because I know, and then honestly, at the end of the year for awards and all that stuff, it's a lot easier. It's like been waiting on everybody and whatnot, but I did enter my stats at the end of the year. I didn't do it during the season. That's just my 2 cents on that. Is I think this levels out the playing field, but it creates more work for everybody. I would start Coach Jason.
Well, I I echo everything you just said. And I think I agree with the spirit of where we're at with it. Either do it or you don't. If you don't, then there's got to be consequences.
Coach Darren?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Coach Jose, Coach Jason.
Coach Lynn?
I am the same way as you. I don't enter my stats until the end of the season, but if people are putting them there, I'm looking, and that's how I am. But yeah, I agree with y'all too. I'm on the same page.
And just to make
I just
sure,
didn't do it because, a couple of my opponents weren't doing it. And I'm like, I know that they're not doing it. Like, why am I going to do it?
well, this requirement is specific for the state series. So your season ending stats have to be done, kind of like if you guys already mentioned, at the end of the season. By the time you finish district, everything through the district tournament needs to be done. Then, but when you go to the first round of the tournament, everything through that round needs to be done, so on and so forth. That's kind of the
So
premise
it's not, you
of
don't
the
have to do
rule.
it every week during season.
Correct. It's just strictly, it's phases, the whole season, then after season, the district tournament, then each round as you go through regionals, as you continue progressing. And that kind of does make it easier on coaches once you do it like that. It's still hard doing the whole season all at once. There's no getting around that, but it still gives you some sort of timeline where you have to get things done. The biggest thing here is what this recommendation asks is to increase the fine significantly. And then the kicker was the suspension of the coach if they failed to do it the second time. So that's where the board was like, okay, let's ask somebody, other committees, to see if this is impactful to them and if it felt a positive or negative. But I definitely hear the feedback here.
Is everybody good with all of that? Yep,
Mhm.
good. All right, sounds good. We're good with moving forward with that. Item on the roundtable for defenders being in the crease, from Coach Krista. Wants to allow defenders to be allowed to enter the crease per the college rules.
I'm a big proponent of that. Sort of in line with some of the other things. I think that one in particular, I think will just bring the game in line with what college is doing, and I think it just, again, in fairness, I think that's a really good proposal. Yeah, so I never understood that rule as I made the switch from men's to women's, the men's and women's game, but I think that would be a great modification.
Thank you, Coach Darren. Coach Lynn?
I'm good with that. I was a defender and I hate it when I was just stepped on the crease and got called for it. So yeah. It's a ticky-tack foul. I hate it.
I echo both coaches as well. Coach Jason?
Same here.
So this item, this was submitted after the submission deadline, so that's why it was not an action item in a discussion. I have two suggestions for the committee's hearing that is in favor. We actually cannot take any sort of action on this item because it's discussion. So what I would ask, one or two or both of this committee, is bring it up next year as an action item, so we can actually take action. One, two, and this is the and or. You can do either both. It's what I spoke about earlier. This is one of those things where it's an NFHS rule compared to NCAA rule. So if it's presented through the NFHS and it's approved by their committee, it's something we don't even have to take action on if it's a rule change that they are in favor of and approve. So when it comes to the rule submissions next year, which I believe begins in January, this would be one that I would suggest going through their rule changing system and providing that rule change. And then we can either, as a state, put our stamp of approval, given the feedback already provided here, and see if that's a rule change that they are in favor of. And if it is, then that's nothing we have to do as a committee because it will be within the rules.
Okay.
It's similar to the shooting space conversation, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's definitely one of those things when it comes to when we're looking at the NCAA rules compared to what we do. We follow NFHS, and that's the rules that we follow. We have to go with. We can modify some of those rules, but that does take our voice away from that rulemaking process. But if they're able to make that change on their end, there's really no need for us to even talk about it.
Sounds good. Thank you. And then I had, Alex, I don't know what happened, but, my email said that I know I did submit it on the 18th at 9 PM. So it was kind of like, you know, but I had an issue. I had a few issues this year with officials. Officials, have been extremely, dangerous this year for my game, especially for my girls. And our whole league down here in South Florida. I have spoken to the FHSAA with the director of officials, with Alex, with everyone, and I don't know, I feel that it's going on deaf ears, but hopefully I understand that there's a lot of frustration with officials in South Florida in my district. Right now we have the following issue. That we used the Sugar Sand officials, which was approved by the FHSAA to have an officials company, you know. That officials company is actually owned by the office manager of one of our competing schools. Exactly. So that I referred that to FHSAA when I found that out. Now, during a game at his home field, the office manager's home field, it was against Miami Country Day. The Miami Country Day coach called a timeout to talk to myself and the officials, and the young lady that he brought up was in tears because an official told her, "Did you forget to take your medicine today?" Unacceptable to talk to a human like that. The official said, "I never said that to her." You know, when you're a coach and you have your players in the background just talking, right? I had heard my players say, "Wow, these officials are being really rude." So before I left the conversation with the two coaches and the referees to ask my captain and my players, "Hey, what have you heard these refs say?" And one of the comments was, "Well, I did hear them say that to this one girl, if she had taken her medicine today, if that's why." Okay. And then they said to one of my players after they asked the question, because once again, these officials that we have down here, number one, language barrier. About 30%, 40% of the officials that we have in girls lacrosse in South Florida do not even speak English. That is a problem. One of the players asked the question to the official, and the same official said, "Oh, do you want a glass of water now with that?" That was game one that we had an issue with. Game two that we had an issue with, opposing player once again. Oh, actually my team against North Broward Prep. An official, I told the officials, because I had learned from this in the beginning of the year, and I told my players, "You are not to speak to the officials. You are not to speak." We have two speaking captains, our goalie and our attack, one at each end, you know, just in case anything happens. My defender got a yellow card and she was going, you know, she didn't say anything. She was going straight for the penalty box. The official was talking to her and she turns around and she goes, "I'm sorry, I am not a speaking captain. Go talk to my speaking captain about it." And the official said, "No, you will talk to me." And this is done after the beginning of the game, when I told the officials None of my players will talk to you, only the speaking captains, because we have had this problem with officials being rude to players. That was number 2. Strike 3, district playoffs against Coral Shores. And the opposing coach called a timeout to talk to myself and the official. He was heated, very heated, and told the official, my players are telling me that you're telling them to shut up on the field. I had been in way too many of these conversations with people. The official that was there knows all of my complaints, and I mean, I got a green card for yelling they are offsides. That's how targeted I've been, because I have been very boisterous about the maltreatment of players, of girls, of little girls, high school girls, and adults talking to them like this. Adults that do not know the rules of the sport talking to them like this. And I said, and I didn't say anything, but then I told the coach, I'm like, I 110% heard him say, shut up to your girls twice on our end. I 100% did. I have called Jeff Johnson, that's the officials guy at FHSA, I think. I forget what his name is.
Jeremy Hernandez.
Jeremy Hernandez, sorry, Jeff Johnson. I don't know why I said Jeff Johnson.
Jeff Johnson's AD at Pinecrest.
I called Jeremy Hernandez about this, and I said, listen, this has been a big issue. Number 1, the owner of the Sugar Sand is an employee of a school that we play against. That's my number 1 red flag. Number 2, what all of these officials are doing is taking an online test. Number 3, they did not get, and this is coming from Sugar Sand, they only had 1 on the field training. One on the field training before season started in August. Just one. Oh, I'm sorry. The 4th instance that I had, and I have this on video because one of the parents sent me and they were not happy. One of my players got 8-meter shot and goes to goal, makes the shot. The defender, after the shot was already in, the defender just chucks her. Right? They were losing, that just chucks her into the crease. I go, what are you doing? That's not a penalty. You can see the referee looking at the sidelines and say, you scored the goal, didn't you? Safety issue there again. I think that this is a huge problem. Alex, I asked you twice earlier, and this is why I asked you twice. If you believe, if the FHSAA wholeheartedly believes in the certification of US Lacrosse for these helmets. You said 100% the first time, and then you said absolutely the second time. So the same energy that you guys have on these helmets, I would like to see on official training and for them to be US Lacrosse certified.
So
I've spoken to US Lacrosse several times, and they are all about having these referees US Lacrosse certified. I think if we are going with what you said in player safety and all, and we mentioned player safety a lot, it starts at the officials, not only with the game, but also with respect with the girls.
So the things that most coaches don't see is that we have quarterly conversations with US Lacrosse regarding training, regarding officials. We can't require officials to be US Lacrosse certified. With that said, 90% of our officials are. They're already USA Lacrosse officials. We personally cannot do that because we're a completely different organization. They already have their dues and fees to their own association, as well as registration fees through ours. So we cannot put them as a requirement to be a part of a different organization. However, we do work in partnership with USA Lacrosse. We've been doing that for several years now. We have official interpreters of the rules, and they are USA certified officials on the boys and girls games. So that is things that are being done now. Regarding the Sugar Sand officials, that is a new association, but don't get me wrong. I mean, they're not that new. They were switched over from the old Broward Association. That association folded, and those officials essentially just changed their names, changed leadership, it's still the same officials. They're not brand new officials. They're seasoned officials. Now, just like anything else, you're going to have your good officials. You're going to have your not so great officials. That's within every organization, especially during the regular season. You have a bigger pool of officials going out there covering games. You have strong, you have weaker, but that doesn't change. The fact is, when it comes to girls lacrosse, this sport as it is right now is in a critical state when it comes to available officials. Critical. There's not that many. The schools are growing. There are more and more programs each and every year. However, the pool of officials is decreasing, and it's decreasing tremendously. And at this moment, I do not see that changing. It was decreasing before COVID. COVID hit, it decreased tremendously after that, and it has not picked up since. So that's a hurdle that we all have to endure as we progress. There's a reason in different parts of the states, schools are not able to schedule how they want to, because officials dictate who's available and when games can happen. Sometimes they have to do double headers because there's only one crew that can cover, X amount of games. It is what it is. We can't just make up officials out of thin air, unfortunately.
But we can. We go ahead, Coach Lee.
So I officiated for many years as well as coach, and my association, well, ours split. We used to be a boys girls official association, and then somebody came down and they split. So now it's just a girls officials association. And there were a couple of us who were coaches as well as officials. And when she took over, she was like, I'm not going to even say the name, but she basically banned us coaches from officiating. There's three, I know in my area that there's 3 of us that would officiate, but they will not allow us. Like, that's just my experience. You know what I mean? Like I feel horrible, but when they won't allow us to do it, like, just saying.
My problem, Alex, with your statements are that we didn't address a lot of things, right? Number one, how the officials become officials, and if they're taking just a test online, is someone taking the test for them?
So here's the thing real quick before, let's just go point by point. That point right there, as I already stated, we don't have enough officials. We don't have people jumping out of the woodworks to become officials. When you're saying, what's the XYZ being done, at this point, those actually are hurdles for people to become officials.
Okay.
We're, like I said, we are in a critical state. We cannot sit here and, in an ideal world, yes, will require, XYZ amount of trainings prior to become officials for it. I do soccer, so we have an abundance of officials in soccer. One thing that we do is we do mandatory evaluations during the season. I would love lacrosse to get to that point, but we can't. We can't create another barrier. At this point, we're more focused on making sure we're able to obtain numbers and retain numbers versus losing. If we get to a point where the numbers go back up, yes, we can go back and say, okay, now that we have an abundance of officials, now let's start being selective. Now let's start identifying who are the cream of the crops and to start rewarding those folks. But we cannot even get to that point when at this point we're begging folks just to be officials.
Is there a cap on how much officials can make?
There is.
Okay, so as a committee, how can we fix getting more officials?
Well, here's the biggest thing we've heard so far, why people are leaving. And it's not money, it's how they're being treated. It's 100% sportsmanship issues by players, coaches, spectators. And we're talking about folks who've been officiating for many, many years, just saying, hey, you know what, I don't have to take this. I do this for the love of the game, and I'm losing the love of the game because of how I'm being treated on the field. So to me, the very first thing that needs to be addressed is how our spectators, our coaches, and our players are treating these officials. A lot of that is done through conversation through associations. We ask associations to host meetings that invite coaches. A lot of times they host the meetings, invite the coaches, they don't come. At this point, it's been about 5 years since we've done that. From what I'm hearing now is they still host the meetings and they stop inviting the coaches because they're just not coming. And it's different from area to area. Some areas they still host the meetings and every coach comes. Other areas, they just don't even do it at all. But at the end of the day, we have to push the effort of retaining and recruiting before anything else. Because if not, we can't have this game without officials. And as it, like I said, I'm not kidding when I say we're in a critical state. We are. We don't have enough. When I start doing playoff assignments for the regional tournaments, I start counting, especially on the girls' side, I start counting crews and seeing how many crews I have available. And I would say 2 years ago, I had more games than I had crews available. This past year, I had the exact number I needed. However, they weren't in the areas I needed. So I had to ask the associations to please assist, provide somebody else that's now on their list. There was one game that only had 2 officials. Now, luckily, there were 2 of our better officials, but it was only 2, and it was a regional final game. We're at a point where we don't have the numbers to be picky. But don't get me wrong, Coach. I hear what you're saying, 100%.
I mean, I hear a lot of issues, but not a lot of like, what can we do?
And
because
what
there-
we're
because
doing
if
is
I-
working with USA Lacrosse to help us bring in some of the pools that they have, some of the younger officials that they have in place. But that's not going to be done overnight.
So, okay.
With that said, with your issue regarding Sugar Sand specifically,
Well, I mean, it's just
Well-
accountability wise.
what I suggest to you, at the end of the day, each association has to contract with a school. So if you're not satisfied with Sugar Sand, seek the alternative with the Southeast Women's Lacrosse Association, see if they can provide some assistance. If they cannot, and I will be honest with you, because of the numbers, it could be the case that they cannot. Then you need to have a sit down, a one-on-one with that association and lay out what are the issues. Here, how can we fix these issues? The only way these things are at least some of the issues you presented are done are by straight direct communications and provide expectations of what you're going to receive from them and what they're going to receive from you, and have that be prior to any game starting. A lot of times you'll get these officials, for better or worse, you'll get these officials and you have your pregame meeting, you give them your expectations, who's speaking. They're not going to listen to you because they have something in their mind already on how they're going to officiate this game. But some of that stuff can be deterred if that communication is had before the season even starts. If you create a contract where you have a scratch list, where you're able to hold the association somewhat accountable to the things they're doing, just like they hold the schools accountable for canceling games. But those conversations need to be had, not just with the coach, but with the school AD and that officials association.
Yeah, no, we had the same meeting. They sent us an email on Tuesday. Hey, we're gonna have a rules committee meeting on Wednesday. Like not even 24-hour meeting. There's no, I would like to put more guidelines and see if we can bring referees from other states, to do something, to ref games or something, but what we're doing now is not working. And when I've spoken to officials about why is this, why is that? And the number one thing I hear is like, we're not going to drive to South Miami for $83, like, and be stuck in traffic after 6 o'clock. That's what I hear. That's why I asked the question of the money aspect of it. Now, are there ways to go around that? 110%, when you pay the association or you do this for more, whatever they want to do. But, I feel disheartened with just hitting with like, kind of like the answer of it is what it is, kind of like we have to deal with it. Like, I think that putting minds together and trying to create more compensation, mileage reimbursement. If you get this certified, you get a bonus. Like, let's be honest, if we can get parents involved and people involved to do this, to donate to the school, to donate to whatever, we can improve on that. Is it feasible for public schools? Probably not, but some private schools can probably help in doing that. I don't know what the formula is, and I know that I'm talking and offering a lot of things, but I don't think that the answer of we're gonna have to deal with it, it is what it is for now, without thinking or creating a plan or saying, hey guys, in 3 months, can everybody come up with some ideas to get referees involved, to, you know, what can incentivize a referee to get US Lacrosse certified? That is what a committee's for. That is what the FHSAA is for, so we can get better officials. The sport is not going to go anywhere.
So the things that we do, I mean, as of right now, we have a task force that specifically looks at officials' compensation. That's been going on for 3 years now. There will be a raise probably in the next 1 or 2 years. So that's something that's already happening. And do not get me wrong. When I say it is what it, I mean, I actually never said it is what it is. What I'm
In so
telling
many
you
words.
is, what I'm telling you is, this is where we're at. This is where we're at. This is a reality. We are not sitting still and saying, well, we can't wipe our hands clean. We're losing officials. That's why we're working hand in hand. Like I said, we have quarterly meetings with USA Lacrosse to have these discussions. We've named specific rules interpreters that specifically go for boys and girls lacrosse on the official side, that are talking points and assist us within as liaisons with USA Lacrosse. So it's not like we're sitting, you know, on our hands and not doing anything, but that doesn't change the facts. The facts is that we're losing numbers. And on top of that, as you mentioned, bringing officials from other states, that happens now. There are people who come
Okay.
from up north and they officiate games in a regular season and then they leave. That happens. And that's really the only way we can get these games done.
Okay.
So it's the thought that we're not doing anything. I don't think that's a correct outlook. I'm just basically telling you, this is where we're at. Are we trying to work with associations? Yes, we are. But once again, you say incentivize people to be USA Lacrosse cert. 90% of the officials already are. They're already USA Lacrosse officials. And the ones who are not are officials who are coming in from other sports.
Level wise is what I mean, like
Well,
level 1 certification, level 2, level 3.
Correct. But
That's what I mean. Like if
I
you're
got
level
you,
2,
I got
you
you.
get paid so much. If you're level 3, you get paid so much.
And the fact of the matter is, we're still not getting enough. And the officials who are not USA certified are officials that are coming from other sports like football or soccer or basketball, who only want to do high school games and are only there to provide assistance because it's critically needed. Now, at the flip side, we're trying to push those folks to be USA officials, registered officials, but we cannot require it. We can only encourage it, which we are, cannot require it. And once again, when we're in this state, we're going to accept anything we can because we need folks to be out there and officiating.
Anybody else have a say in the matter?
You know, I'm just sitting here thinking we had the same situation. I had a game canceled this year. We had, I don't know if you're familiar with Steinbrenner and Newsom. They're the two powerhouse teams here in Tampa, and they had a game canceled. You know, and so we've had the same experience here. Fortunately, with TWLO, the officiating's fairly decent. You know, I haven't had the same experience as you have, Coach, but you know. And my daughter, when she was still here, she you know, she plays in college. She would come home during the summer and she'll referee for TWLO. You know, I'm just sitting here thinking, how do we get behind that? How do we get these college girls and, you know, kids like that have the time to get involved and be coaches? Because it is, and I agree with you, Alex, it is critical. I mean, when you get the games canceled like we have, I mean, I lost a game to Academy of Holy Names, which is a big deal for me. So, you know, I don't have an answer, but I think if we all, you know, kind of put our heads together and come up with something, that we could push something out to the different organizations, and see if we can't get behind that. I mean, I agree with you 100%. We do need to be actionary.
Yeah, I don't know if FHSAA has a marketing budget for, you know, we need officials now type flyer on social media or something to reach out. Y'all have a lot of emails as well, you know, to send out to people. The thing is what I get back to is having a plan, you know, we're a committee, you know, having decisions made, you know, figuring out what to do, because in 5 years, what are we gonna do?
And those are things we're working on now. And yes, we do have a social media campaign, becomeanofficial.org. Now that's part of it as well, when we do send that out.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, I would like to leave this item on the agenda for our next meeting. Is everybody good with that?
For sure.
Cool. Okay. And with that being said, this meeting has been adjourned.
All right. So at 12:20, the meeting is adjourned. Hey, I do want to thank everyone for being part of the meeting. Once again, as I said earlier, I appreciate you guys taking your time out of your busy schedule. You know, we're all busy, you know, end of the year stuff. So I understand we all have jobs and stuff like that. So I do appreciate you guys taking your time. It's hard, and I appreciate all the feedback, all the information you guys have provided for us. I would push some of these items forward. Jose or Jason, both of you, I guess I'll be in communication with you guys regarding the August ADAC to present some of these items to ADAC. Once those schedules are released, I'll send you an email and we'll go from there. All right.
Very good. Nice
Thank
meeting
guys.
Appreciate
you all.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
y'all.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, bye.